I really believe so much in classes and studying. And I still, during the pandemic, I studied with Helen Hunt on Zoom. And I still, take classes when I can because I feel like it's from my history, it's where I've learned how to do things so that
Right.
when I'm professionally working, I know how to take care of myself.
Absolutely. And you are constantly willing to challenge yourself and be dedicated to the idea of growing and changing, which is, we're not the same as we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 25 years ago.
Right.
And we have to keep up with ourselves. And the way you
Yes.
can do that is by stretching. Welcome to Write for the Role, the podcast. I'm your host, John Frank Levey. Thanks for joining me as I sit down with my friends and colleagues to explore their journeys to discover the roles they're right for professionally and personally. As you listen, it's my greatest hope that you'll find inspiration and motivation to embrace the roles in your life you were always meant to play. And now I'd like to introduce my guest. He's an actor who's done something incredible. He's consistently worked for more than 3 decades with hundreds of credits to his name. You may recognize him for his recent work on such critically acclaimed shows as Somebody Somewhere, Hacks, and The Perfect Couple. Or you might know him as the shoe salesman in Curb Your Enthusiasm, Larry in Will and Grace, or Harold Crenshaw in Monk. I'm talking about the wonderful Tim Bagley, whom I've had the pleasure to cast in several shows, including ER, Southland, Shameless, and the short-lived The Court. Tim, can you forgive me for two of those four castings? In Southland, you played a flasher who had the unfortunate experience of exposing himself to a police officer, um, and a very serious one, Regina King, and also in ER, you played a guy with a severe case of OCD who was snapping a rubber band on his uh, wrist for quite a lot of the scene. And I wonder how it affected our friendship that that's how I saw you.
Well, I will be honest with you. I love the way whenever you've called me in for something, it's never something that I've played before. It's never the way other people have seen me. It's always something that you see, and usually I get it and I think, okay, let me find myself in that role. Let me see who I am in there. And I remember ER came, it was one of my first jobs. It was early on, and it was certainly my first dramatic opportunity. And and I just remember, it was yeah, I would get stuck counting or something. I had OCD and I would get stuck counting, and the only thing that would stop me is if I snapped a rubber band on my wrist. And I was picked up downtown walking back and forth counting or something, and then they got my therapist on the phone and she told me to snap the wrist. If I remember correctly, that's kind of what
Yeah,
happened.
that's my memory of it as well. I think the role that I cast you in that was the rightest, if I can quote the title of the podcast and my memoir, was the role opposite Sally Field in The Court,
Oh, I
where
love
you
that.
were smart, dedicated, and fiercely loyal. You weren't a lawyer, but you.
No, but I was loyal to her, and I loved that role. I do have a story I want to tell about uh, um, uh, Southland. But before I go back to Regina King, I want to say with the court, what I remember, in all of these jobs, I always learn so many lessons on the set about life, about being an actor, about how to be, how not to be, things like that. And the big takeaway from the court for me was uh, I was so overwhelmed that it was Sally Field, and I just, I just remember feeling like I was way out of my league. And what happened was the first scene we shot, I she is a Supreme Court justice, and she's rolling up with a baggage cart that's got files on it to the front of the Supreme Court building. And they built a Supreme Court building for this. And so I go up, I hand her a coffee, and I take the bag, and my line was, "You seem more like a, a flight attendant than a Supreme Court justice." That was my first line. And then she grabs the coffee and she said, "Is there cream in there? No sugar?" And I look at her like, of course, like, I know you, I know. And then we walk down and we enter a building together talking. So the first take, I said to her, "You look more like a Supreme Court justice. No, you look more like a flight attendant than a real estate agent." And I don't know why it came out like that. And then I hear the director go, "Cut." And then I said, "I don't know why I said that to Sally Field." And she said, "Well, at the time, I probably looked like a real estate agent." And I said, "No, you look like Sally Field."
Yeah.
You look
You
like
know
Sally.
what? My experience with Sally, and I don't know if you were there, but there was a table read at some point during the short-lived existence of that series where Sally had to deliver a huge page and a half of legal mumbo jumbo, and she got bollocksed. And then she used 7 or 8 of the most foul words I'd ever heard, and they were coming out of the Flying Nun from my point of view. And it was really, she looked more like a drunken sailor than the Flying Nun suddenly, and it was kind of frightening. But let's go back to the Regina story because I think I know where you're headed with it. And Regina is immensely talented and also a very generous actor, and I think you experienced that.
Yes, as often is the case, an actor will say yes to the opportunity to audition for something. And, you just look at it and I thought, "Oh, this is a great role. I was so proud of this role and grateful for the opportunity." Somebody that exposes himself to Regina King, and then at the end of the show, he's released and everything. And then he goes back and he asks her if she wants to go out and have a cup of coffee. And I just remember going there, and it said in the script that he doesn't have his pants on. And so I remember going through wardrobe and everything, and I knew all this in my head, but it wasn't until they came up right before we started shooting, and they said, "It's time for me to take your pants." And I had a little like sock thing that kind of covered
Yeah.
my kibbles and bits. And I just remember like taking my pants off. We were on location in some neighborhood and people were all around, taking my pants off and just walking around with my butt out. And then when I expose myself, and then I would say, do you want some of this or something?" I said something like that. And then she goes, "Do I want some?" And she comes up and she grabs me and handcuffs me and takes me into the car. And then we would reshoot that. And each time I would slide out of the car with my handcuffs, um, I would ask her if she would be kind enough to pull my shirt out of my butt crack. And she was very generous. I only had to ask once or twice, and then she always did that. And she was so nice and so professional, and just such a generous person, and always was looking out for me, making sure I felt comfortable and everything. And yeah. And the other thing I remember about that one was I told my mom that I was so proud of it, and and that I really wanted her to watch it and everything. And then she kind of scolded me and said, "You were a sex pervert." And I said, "Yes." And she was like, "Well, I told all my friends to watch it." And she was kind of embarrassed. And I just remember explaining to her, as an actor, like, you want to play characters that are not like you, and you want to be challenged and get your mind into that role. And it was like I just remember like having to explain to her that I was thrilled with it, and she just
Yeah. Tim, one of the things that is in my memoir, right, for the role, is a thing that's resonated for a lot of people. And I say that there are two kinds of actors, the kinds that get to and the kinds that have to. And, your bravery and freedom and openness and willingness and even desire to be challenged is one of the things that's so extraordinary. You said that the ER role was one of your early opportunities to do dramatic things. I've had fabulous luck with funny people playing in drama. What do you think? Where do you think comedy comes from?
well,
I have a point of view about it, but I want to know what yours is.
I mean, it's comes from pain and shame and sadness and, understanding of, you know, the complications of life. And so to me, it's never been a stretch to play a dramatic role. I always get it because I know that what's funny to me is dark humor and, you know, uh, you know, the pain of life.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, but I would also add two other words, which I think is really exemplified in your comic work, and that's empathy and authenticity. You really have the capacity. You didn't judge the flasher and think of him the way your mom did. You thought of him as a fully three-dimensional person, and you
Yeah,
got to explore him in a way that made him not monstrous, but
yeah.
empathetic.
I thought of him as somebody that was lonely, didn't really know how to approach women, didn't really know how to do all that, and that this was his way of kind of being masculine and aggressive and showing that, like being empowered. And then when I showed up at her door, at Regina King's character's door at the end, um, I think that that's kind of who he really was, just somebody that wanted to have a cup of coffee with an attractive woman.
Yeah. I was wondering when you found out you were funny, and also um, if you had any comedy role models when you were a kid that people that you thought were funny.
Well, okay, the first thing is I was very serious. I auditioned for, shows and stuff in my high school, and I was cast in the chorus of Hello Dolly. And so I wasn't really um when I set out, I wasn't really thinking in terms of being an actor. But I auditioned for a group called the Young Americans. And when I was in that group, the director of the group noticed something in me. And he had me do a thing where I wore like a Tarzan costume and I came out and I beat people on the head with a plastic club. And it garnered laughs. And I just remembered the first time feeling the power of getting laughs. And then I think I was singing a lot and dancing during that time. And after that, and I was singing at Lawrence Welk Dinner Theater. And I remember being there thinking, I should be making fun of these people. I'm not one of these people. I'm somebody that should be making fun of them. I was singing a song, uh, Candyman, with a girl and, like doing a little dance and song. And I just remember at that time, after that, going to the Groundlings. And that's when I started kind of figuring out what my comedic voice was. But I remember early on thinking, yeah, I'm not one of these, song and dance people that wants to be taken seriously. I should be making fun of these people. And so that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. You've just given me two segues into the next two things I want to cover with you. Um, But and first of all, I guess I contacted your manager Hannah Roth, and asked her to send me some clips from somebody somewhere
Oh,
because
okay.
I hadn't watched it. My longtime partner Karen has watched it and just thought it was. She just said, "If you don't watch this, you're the dumbest." And so I got these scenes, and was reminded that when I first knew that ER was going to be a giant success was during the pilot. I think it was the pilot. It might have been another early episode. John Randolph, a wonderful old character actor at the time, was playing the husband of a woman named Herta Ware, who happened to be the widow of Will Geer, who is an important leftist and theater actor here in L.A. And she was dying, and he kissed her on her eyes and sang that old black magic. And he didn't try to sing it. He played the scene through the song. And that's what you did so brilliantly in the song scene in Somebody Somewhere. You're a better singer than the character you were playing, and I know that, but you sang it from your heart, not your diaphragm. And that was so moving.
Well, thank you. You're talking about the one in season 3.
The
I
song,
did a
the love
song
song
in.
to your lover at the
Okay,
party.
yeah. That was it was interesting to do that because I knew what I wanted to do. And I got myself all, I was listening to a very specific song in the headphones. And it wasn't a sad moment, it was a celebratory moment, but I wanted to feel raw and emotional. And we did it just a few times, a couple times, once for rehearsal and then twice. And I remember the director would come up to me in between shots. He came up and he was, saying, oh, it's breaking everybody up, and you're, and then making jokes and like this. And I just remember saying, I kind of need to be alone because I don't want to be out of what I'm doing. So please, just let me kind of be in this space. And I felt like I hoped he didn't think I was being like a diva or something, but it was important to me to stay in that kind of raw place. And so I just my lesson on that show was to get what you need, and if somebody is kind of you know getting in the way of what you're trying to do, to be able to just say, this is what I need.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, because you have that wonderful Midwestern kindness and gentleness in your persona, in your real persona, you couldn't be the kind of diva that somebody else might have been in that similar moment. The other segue you just gave me is the Groundlings, and which has been your creative home for a hell of a long time. And I'm a great believer in community and collaboration and respect. And you guys have been working together. I recently had the pleasure of watching you in the reunion uh, night with a bunch of people who you've been improvising with for decades. And it was so clear that there was connection between most of you. and and I just love that you at this point in your career, you're probably not getting any monetary gain or any fame or anything out of your connection to the Groundlings, but it has a sustaining quality for you. Can you talk a little bit about your relationship to the Groundlings and what it
Sure.
means?
Sure. I had been studying acting with Gordon Hunt and then Nina Foch and I think Daryl Hickman back in the day. And when I was with Nina Foch, and then eventually Margie Haber and um, Howard Fine. But what happened was when I was with Nina Foch, she would hand us scripts that she would want us to do, and one of mine was a king. And and whenever she would hand me something, I always felt like I don't feel like this person. Like I don't know how to find this person. And she was the one that said, you know, what you need to do. She handed me the role of a king, and she said, you need to go take classes at the Groundlings and get so that you don't have a thing in front of you that says I can't do this. And so I took classes at the Groundlings, and you know, eventually I found that I was really good at just being in the moment and coming up with information and all that. And so that's where I was for a long time. And um, and those relationships, you know, you go through class with Lisa Kudrow or Michael Hitchcock or, you know, Mike McDonald, Jennifer Coolidge, these people, you go through class with them and you get to be in the company with them and you have these long histories with them where, you know, we've kind of gone through this whole process together and, you know, call upon each other periodically. And I just think of it as um, kind of a home base. And I taught there for many years, and I love going there. But I also have to say, I worked on a show called Teachers, and Ian Roberts was the showrunner, and he was one of the founders of UCB. And the girls, a lot of them were in UCB on Teachers, so they had a whole different language. So right before the pandemic, I went through the, you know, 4 levels of classes at UCB because I hadn't taken an improv class in years, and so that I could read Ian's book and kind of work on that. And I really believe so much in classes and studying. And I still like I during the pandemic I studied with Helen Hunt on Zoom, and I still, you know, take classes when I can because I feel like it's from my history, it's where I've learned how to do things so that when I'm professionally working, I know how to take care of myself.
Absolutely. And you know, you are constantly willing to challenge yourself and be dedicated to the idea of growing and changing, which is, you know, we're not the same as we were 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 25 years ago.
Right.
And we have to keep up with ourselves. And the way you
Yes.
can do that is by stretching. I hate having my picture taken. I always have. I'm so uncomfortable being the center of attention, I guess, that I always make funny faces. And there's a famous picture of me as a hippie with an orange traffic cone on my head. Imagine that. When it came time to have a picture taken for the flap of my memoir, Right for the Role, I was introduced to a photographer named Eusebio Hernandez. And he made me feel so comfortable and relaxed that we got a great shot. If you're looking for headshots, I strongly recommend that you contact Eusebio Hernandez, and his contact information is available on the show notes. I have a little Nina Foch story.
Oh,
She was married to a guy named Michael Duell. I think they used to call it a marriage of convenience, but I don't know that for sure. But I was working for Michael, teaching acting for teenagers at a place in the valley, and Michael invited my then wife and me to dinner with Nina, and at a certain point, Nina was pontificating about something, and my ex, the mother of my children, who's still a very good friend of mine, said to her, "Oh, give me a break." And Nina flipped out and said, "Give you a break? You spoiled kids are just everybody's giving you breaks your whole life." And Blaine stood up and said, "John, we're going home." And we left between the salad and the main course. And Nina was pretty provocative.
well, she was, I mean, as a teacher, she was certainly dramatic. But I will say, she, the way she worked was really specific. she would put a line before the a line and say, and write on that line, to seduce. It was always some active
Yeah.
action, and to be coy, to whatever. And it was, and so that the whole script was covered with these slash lines with things like that. And what I learned really from the Groundlings that was different from that was just being present and having an intention and everything, but things shift and change according to what your partner is giving you, so you
Yeah.
can't just hang on to what you've prepared.
Yeah. I think the axiom that I believe in is your performance is actually over there. It's not here.
Yeah, right,
It's
right.
over there. And, I'd love to switch gears a little bit now with you. In the research that Trudy gave me about you, it's interesting to have a friend that you've known for decades, and then you get research presented and you find out all kinds of stuff that you
Oh,
didn't really know.
oh.
No, no, don't worry. You used words like optimism and gratitude, and you talk about being really seen, and being really, and that implies that there's something real to see, and that the journey of artists and people ought to be a journey of self-discovery and self-growth. And you've clearly been on that journey, and you clearly understand the importance of that journey. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I knew when I was young that I had a lot of things to figure out and work out. And I knew that back then I could only really do it in New York, Los Angeles, or San Francisco. And I thought if I go to New York, I've got to deal with snow, and I didn't want that. And I thought if I moved to San Francisco, everybody will know I'm gay. And so I moved to LA and went to therapy right from the jump, and have always kind of been in and out of therapy and trying to figure out how to be my best self and my most authentic self. And just kind of going through life with an optimism and a gratitude and all those kinds of things, and seeing people for who they are, and not necessarily their position. We have a mutual friend, Tony Sepulveda, and he's had one of the heads of casting. He's explained his job to me several times, and I only hear half of what he says. But I know he's like one of the heads of casting at Warner Brothers, and so because of him, I understood what the process was like for casting people. And so I've always, rather than thinking of casting people as someone, somewhere high on this hill, I look at these people and what they're challenged with and what they're trying to do. And it's the same part of every other part of my life. I look at people where they are, and what they're trying to accomplish, what they're trying to do, what's in their way, how I can assure them, how I can, help and fit in and all that. So I don't know, I think that all that therapy has been actually useful to me in a lot of ways. And also, of course, with my work, like when I was in college, I studied psychology. So I look at every role that I do, like, why am I doing this? What makes me be this person that would do it this way? And this is different from me, or this I understand because it's like me. I would do this. So I'm always thinking of my work that way,
Yeah.
based on psychology.
You just mentioned that you, if you had gone to San Francisco, everybody would have known you were gay, and you have recently been called an unsung hero for the LGBTQ world, and you have, you played a character that was getting married in a same-sex marriage at a time when that was a gigantic thing in society. And you have, I think, um, recently, much more so, uh, resisted the kind of tropes and cliches of gay depiction. I imagine earlier on in your career, you didn't have as much choice about it, but now that you're, have established yourself, you've resisted playing sort of flamboyant queens.
Well, yeah, let me explain that because I've always been. Let's see, how do I even start this? So yeah, there was that article that came out in the Advocate, and that was very sweet. That John Casey wrote that, and the truth is, I remember making the decision whenever Wings was. That was a long time ago, but I was asked to audition for the role to play Abe Ben-Ruby's partner. Abe Ben-Ruby is a straight guy, and my agents.
He was on ER for many, many seasons
Yes,
as the desk clerk, and he's
yeah,
a giant of a man.
wonderful man.
Yeah.
And so I remember my agent kind of saying, now, this is tricky for a gay person to take on a gay role. And I remember kind of, being advised to really think about this. And that was when I made the decision. I just remember thinking, I'm not going to, if an opportunity comes up and I'm representing well, I'm not going to say no to it, because I want the opportunity. And if not me, who's going to be able to play that better? And so I remember doing that job. I think we did one or two episodes where I played his partner, um, and then I've always kind of been cautious about. I remember there was an opportunity to audition for a gay guy that was pulled over by the police, and he was wearing a boa, and he was trying to come on to the cop and doing all this. And I remember just saying to my agent way back then, I just don't want to represent like this. I don't want to be this kind of guy. And there are people like that, and they'll find somebody to do that. But I just didn't. I wanted to represent well. So all along, I feel like I've made choices to, like with Will and Grace. I remember, um, you know, they asked me. They asked me to audition for the role of Larry and Joe, and said that they would be using us because they couldn't really use the two lead men that were playing gay. They couldn't use them to show marriage or adoption or dating even. And so they were at that time, it was early on in Will and Grace. And so they asked if, I was cool with that. And I was. And I was proud to be the first gay wedding on TV, in a sitcom. And we kissed, and that was a big deal at the time. And they and then we adopted a baby and all this kind of stuff. So I've always kind of made choices, and it's really, I think what you're referring to about recently is, there was a situation where I had a director tell me that she needed me to be a gay clown, and I was like, I don't want to do that. And she was like, yes, it has to be. You have to be very flamboyant gay. You are gay and you have to be flamboyant. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And I did what I wanted to do. And I was used in a couple of the episodes, but then a lot of my stuff was faded out, and the director didn't like what I did. But I also am strong enough now where I know how to take care of myself, and and I have no problem, saying what I'm comfortable with and what I'm not comfortable with. But what happens is you get kind of an idea of how you want to play this, and then when they want you to do some take that doesn't really go with what you're thinking, it was easy for me to say no. And I think I even said to her when she said, you have to be a gay clown, I think I said to her, I don't even think you can say that anymore.
Well, yes, indeed. I hope I'm not sharing something that we exchanged privately, but
That's all right.
you at one time I think shared with me that a lot of your friends in the Groundlings were getting opportunities at Saturday Night Live, for instance, and you didn't get those opportunities. And at a certain point, I think you felt that because you were out and not unapologetically out, that was a form of discrimination. And
Well, yeah, I mean, it was notorious. They were known for not hiring gay people on camera. There was one guy, I think Terry Sweeney, and he was on and he would play Nancy Reagan, and he's the only gay person that they've ever hired up until Kate McKinnon.
uh,
They didn't know. Lauren Michaels didn't know she was gay. She, at the end of that first season, there was an article that came out, and she said she was gay, and apparently, he was not pleased with that. But she was undeniably fantastic on the show.
yeah.
A couple of years after that, a few years after that, they hired their very first um, gay performer.
That
Anyway, they
there
finally
was
hired a.
resistance to gayness,
Well,
and
yeah,
there were agents who would tell you, that as a Jew, there were agents who told Jewish performers, change your name from Greenberg to
yes,
just Green, or
yes. I mean, there's always been that, but I think that when you make the choice to be out, there are going to be people and certainly institutions like SNL. Now, I know that they hired uh, a writer named Paula Pell, who was wonderful. She's a wonderful performer, but they hired her as a writer, and I think that she came out later in life. But they were known, so I knew I wouldn't get an opportunity to
uh-huh.
audition for SNL. But that's all right. I found my own kind of path, and I love
Sure.
the path that I found because I've cobbled together a career. Um, as an actor, a working actor, and I auditioned, for most of what I've done in the past. Lately I've been having things offered more, and that's fantastic. But you know, I never let that my sexuality get in the way if I could help it. I just never wanted to hide. And I think
Yeah.
part of that is because, you know, my generation, we lost so many people. And I
Mm.
always just looked at it like I've got the opportunity to be here. So I should be somebody that represents well and openly and, proudly. And that's kind of how I've tried to conduct myself.
Yeah, well, two things come to mind from that. You know, one of the things that I'm the most proud of is that I did it for such a long time, and that that I one thing led to another, and I earned everything along the way. If you're getting offers now, it's based on the auditions you did 10 years ago. It's not just some gift you've been given. It's something earned, and the fact that you and I share longevity. And that we were able to adapt as life went on. During the stuff that I read about you, I learned about that you had been fired from Friends, and that excuse me, that you worked again for many of those producers
All of
who
them.
didn't remember it at all. And you had been banned from talking about it by your
By my
friends
term.
because
By my,
you had carried it for a while. And
well, and Tony Sepulveda will certainly tell you he was one of them. I really did carry it for a decade, and then when I worked, for each one of the creators of Friends, and none of them remembered firing me, and it was just like such a lesson in
yeah.
you can't take any of this seriously. They're making decisions. You can't take it personally or seriously. You just have to kind of go forward and not really hang on to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm still grappling that because you were fired from Friends, but I was fired by Friends. not the television show, but a director I had worked with for more than 25 years, who begged me to join him on a show that really didn't hold much interest for me, but out of loyalty, I said yes. And I did 2 seasons of this show. And then when they got picked up for the 5th season of their creative life, I was very excited. And I called him and said, I'm so excited. We're going to get to do another season. And he said, no, we're going another way. We're letting you go. And I never got an explanation. And I bump into this person occasionally at social events, and it's awkward. And I'm still trying to learn the lesson that you got to learn organically. That I have to stop carrying this around with me and stop thinking about it and caring about it. And I haven't gotten all the way there yet.
Well, what I would say about that, John, is figure out what you can learn from it. If there's anything in there that you can learn from it, take that away, and that will be useful and helpful. And then the rest of it, it's just you can't control it, and that's the hard part. But I think as actors, as an actor, you get fired or replaced or things like that periodically, and I don't know. I feel like that whole Friends thing was such a great lesson early on because, especially when I started working for those people and had a great relationship with all three of the creators of Friends, and they did not remember. And it just, to me, was one of those things, John, where I just think you can't hang on to that stuff. Oh, here's a good example of that. After the court, I remember Sally Field saying, we weren't picked up, and we found out on ABC let us know it was on Entertainment Tonight, and so we were still shooting, but we found out that we were not picked up. And the next day, I was talking to Sally, and she was saying to all of us, well, here's the thing: none of us can work for ABC again. You just I will never work for them again. And, and there was anger and I remember kind of thinking, well, I don't really have that luxury. I kind of have to work for it, but thinking, gosh, how am I going to do that to just not work for ABC? And then several months later, she was on Brothers and Sisters, which I think was on ABC.
Yeah.
And I just thought, okay, so it's okay to be mad. You get upset, but you have to figure out how to move forward and forgive and let go and not hold on to it, because that's the holding on to it that can make you crazy. And believe me, I did it, and I drove my friends crazy about Friends for a good 8 to 10 years until they were telling me, I cannot hear about Friends again. I still have them say, like, they'll say something, I'll be mad about something, and they'll say, Tim, please don't bring up Friends. And
well,
so
fortunately, I only quietly in my own time when I'm alone think to myself, shit,
I know, like,
that
what
wasn't
could I do, or
fair.
what could I have done differently, or what happened, or
Yeah.
there are so many answers that we don't have.
Yeah,
And as
absolutely.
actors, we just have to get used to that. As for me, I've had to learn how to just get used to that. Here's something that I always think about when you audition and you go in. I remember one time being in a room, and I remember one of the other actors in the room was Rainn Wilson, a wonderful actor. And we were on the phone, and we were in the casting office, and the partition on the other side, we could hear the casting director making an offer to John Hamm for this same role that we were there auditioning for. And I remember sitting there, and I remember saying to somebody next to me, like, how is this like, how is this okay? But it's just a part of the process, and they have to get a regular actor in case they can't get a celebrity, a famous person. And so I just kind of made peace with that. But that's one of those things where you can't let that make you not want to go in and try.
Oh, absolutely.
It did make me stop hiring a coach. From then on, I just started thinking, guess what? They're going to get what they get. They're going to get what I have, and I'm not going to spend money on a coach to help me.
Oh, good. I'd like to switch gears once again because you earlier on you mentioned that in the gay community that there was so much loss during the AIDS epidemic, and that touched you personally. Um, I remember one day that John Wells called me on the phone. John Wells, the executive producer of ER and so much else that I worked with for so many decades. And he said, We want to do an HIV story, but we want to make sure that the actor who plays the part actually is HIV positive or has AIDS." And I didn't know quite what to do. Um,
Yeah,
and
that's a conundrum. I mean,
yeah,
to me, that's the part about casting that is fascinating to me. I can remember being out to dinner with Tony's puppet, and he says, "I've got to come up with 60 Shakespearean actors by tomorrow morning."
yeah.
And it's just like,
Yeah.
what
Well,
are
it happened that at the time, my associate was a gay man, and he said, "Well, why don't you just call the whatever it was called, the Gay Alliance or something at that time, and see if they can help." So I called the L.A. Gay and Lesbian something or other society, and I said, "Hey, I'm the casting director for ER, and we want to do a story about HIV, and do you happen to know any HIV positive actors, men in their 30s? And if so, would you be kind enough to send me their names and contact information, and I'll see all of them." And, as a straight man, I hadn't experienced HIV in the same way that your community had. When these actors came in, and one particular guy who ended up getting the job, I think his name was Richard Frank, but I'm not 100% sure of that. Um, After his audition, John said to him, "God, that was just spectacular. We want to hire you," which is not something he did very often. And the guy said, "When does it shoot?" And I knew the schedule, so I piped up, and I think it shoots next Tuesday, and this was a Thursday. And he said, "My T cell count is 0. I probably won't be alive next Tuesday."
Hmm.
And I got it in a visceral, real way for the first time. And I know, that you experienced the loss of a longtime partner of yours to that epidemic. And I really don't have a question.
Well, I mean, yes. Do you want me to talk about that?
A little bit, if you don't mind.
Sure, I don't mind. So I remember back then when Bill died, it was 95, and I remember thinking everybody's going to think that I'm HIV positive, and I was tortured by that for a long time. And I'm negative. I'm still negative, but it was one of those things that tormented me, and there was such shame around the disease and around gay people, and the government was not there at all. I mean, it was like the exact opposite of what Trump did. He actually, you know if he was a smidge smarter, he would have really made a big deal out of the fact that he, did a good job of getting, or his, the people that work for him or whatever, getting uh, a vaccine, because they still don't have a vaccine for HIV. And they, a couple weeks after Bill died, they came up with I saw on the news that they got like what is it called? A cocktail, a mixture of drugs so that people could live with it. And I thought that that was, great for all those people, but it just came late for Bill.
Right.
And, and I think that, you know, what it did for me was, certainly made me angry at the government and at people. Um, I saw who our allies were. I'm still to this day grateful for the lesbian community because they really rolled their sleeves up and got in there and did what they could to help their gay brothers. And, I just kind of feel, and for the allies, the straight allies, I see that and I'm very aware of that. And I'm grateful. But I remember what it did for me was it made me not want to hide. It did, they wanted us to hide and shrink and like that, and it really empowered me and gave me an anger that moved me forward in a way that uh, that I knew I was determined to be authentically who I am and to take whatever kinds of roles I can take that somehow present gay people in a positive way, and that's what I've tried to do.
Yeah, and you have succeeded in that. And earlier you talked about wanting to be seen and to be seen authentically as who you really are. And I thank you so much today for letting us see you.
Of course,
Um,
John.
and when you go to the Emmys this year, when you get nominated for something, somebody somewhere, I hope you will take Jennifer Coolidge as your date so she can be the plus one instead of you being the plus one. Um,
That's funny.
I won't share the content of it, but I do want to tell you that you nearly killed me the last time we were in Hawaii when you and Tony did that improv in the car and
Wasn't
in the car on the way back to the hotel. And it, I got back to the room, and Karen was staying up late reading, and I was going to sleep. And I started laughing again. And I was laughing so hard that I honestly thought I could possibly have a heart attack. Um, so I want you to know that the phrase, you killed it, almost came true.
I don't even remember the what you're talking about.
Oh, yes, you do.
I really don't.
Oh, you do, because when I said to you recently that your impression of a particular famous person was so funny that it nearly killed me, you said it's not so funny
Oh,
now.
oh yes. Okay, I know what you're talking about now. I know what you're
Um,
talking about now. Um,
I like to end these conversations with, when I was a little boy, my mom used to say to me kind of regularly, "Say three words that tell me who you are." Would you be so kind as to say three words that tell us who Tim Bagley is?
uh, sure. I would say kind, empathetic, and an asshole.
That's four words.
Well, that's true. I was being a slash when in between
Yes,
slash
okay,
and hole.
slash.
Hmm.
Thank you so much, Tim. It's really been a pleasure.
It's always great to see you, John. Thank you for everything. You've been such a supporter and contributor to my career, and I just am so grateful to you. And I loved your book, and I'm so happy for all the success you've had with your book and in your life. And I love you, so it's good to spend this time with you.
Well, good. And since neither of us are HIV positive, we don't need that cocktail, but we can get together and have a cocktail.
Regular cocktail, just a regular cocktail. That sounds fantastic to
All
me.
right. Love
All
you.
right,
Thank you.
love you. Okay, bye bye.